The Algorithm of Revenge: How I Accidentally Took Down Silicon Valley's Worst Boss. The day I decided to destroy my boss started like any other Tuesday at NeuraTech: overpriced cold brew, startup platitudes plastered on concrete walls, and Vivian Chen screaming at some poor developer through the glass walls of her office. Today's victim was Raj, our brilliant back-end engineer. His crime? Suggesting we might need more time for adequate security testing before launching our new feature. Vivian's voice carried across our open-plan office despite the noise-canceling headphones most of us wore specifically to block her out. Do you think Google waits? Do you think Zuckerberg waits? Move fast and break things. That's how we build a unicorn. I caught Raj's eye as he slunk back to his desk, his shoulders curved inward like a defensive parenthesis. I gave him a small nod of solidarity, the office equivalent of pouring one out for a fallen homie. Just another Tuesday in Silicon Valley's most toxic startup. What I didn't know then was that in exactly 3 months, I would accidentally orchestrate the most spectacular tech company implosion since Theranos, all because I tried to build an algorithm to predict when our CEO would have her next meltdown. My name is Morgan Park, and this is how I accidentally took down the Valley's worst boss using nothing but data science, a mediocre poker face, and the power of unintentional revenge. Let me back up and explain how I ended up at NeuraTech in the first place. 6 months earlier, I'd been a bright-eyed data scientist fresh out of Georgia Tech, armed with a machine learning degree and the misguided optimism that Silicon Valley was still the meritocratic utopia of my dreams. I'd binge-watched all 6 seasons of Silicon Valley, twice, and genuinely believed the worst part of working at a hot startup would be overly competitive ping-pong matches and deciding which free snack to grab from the kitchen. Narrator voice: I was extremely wrong. NeuraTech was the darling of the AI startup scene, a revolutionary emotion recognition platform that empowers brands to understand customer sentiment in real time. That's corporate speak for we use creepy facial recognition to tell companies when you hate their products but are too polite to say it. Our CEO and founder, Vivian Chen, had the perfect Silicon Valley origin story. Former Google engineer who dropped out of her Stanford PhD program because she couldn't wait to disrupt the market. She'd graced the cover of Wired, been named to the Forbes 30 Under 30, and raised $85 million in Series B funding based largely on her personal brand as a visionary. The day I interviewed, Vivian herself took me on an office tour. At NeuraTech, we're not just building a product, she said, gesturing expansively around our industrial chic office. We're revolutionizing human connection. Making the unspoken, speakable. I nodded enthusiastically, mentally calculating how quickly this job would help me pay off my student loans. We need people who can keep up, she continued, fixing me with an intense stare. People who will put in the hours and sacrifice what needs to be sacrificed. Are you that person, Morgan? Absolutely, I lied, imagining reasonable work-life balance and maybe even healthcare benefits. I'm ready to give it my all. 3 red flags I missed during that interview. 1. The way current employees avoided eye contact with Vivian, as if trying to avoid being noticed by a T-Rex whose vision is based on movement. 2. The suspicious absence of any employees over 35. 3. The inspirational quote painted on the wall of Vivian's office: "Sleep is for the weak." The job offer came with a salary that would finally let me stop living with 4 roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment. I signed immediately. The first month wasn't bad. It was the corporate honeymoon phase. I was learning our systems, meeting colleagues, and blissfully unaware of the horror show to come. The real Vivian Chen revealed herself during my 5th week, when our user engagement metrics dipped 2.3% after an app update. I was coding peacefully at my desk when I heard what sounded like a bomb going off in the conference room. It was actually just Vivian slamming her MacBook shut so hard I later learned it cracked the screen. "This is unacceptable," she screamed at our product team. "You're telling me users don't like the update? Did you all get your degrees from a cereal box? Fix it. Now." Our product manager, Aiden, tried to explain that we needed time to gather more data before making changes. Poor, rational Aiden. He was fired on the spot. Let this be a lesson, Vivian announced to the stunned office after Aiden was escorted out. At NeuraTech, we don't make excuses. We find solutions. I texted my best friend that night, I think my boss might be a sociopath. She replied, isn't that a job requirement for tech CEOs? Over the next few months, I witnessed Vivian make our receptionist cry because the almond milk in Vivian's latte was too cold. Fire an engineer for taking a sick day. Throw a prototype VR headset against a wall during a demo. Call our biggest investor a gutless parasite with the vision of a mole rat to his face. Take credit for a patent that our CTO developed. Change our entire product roadmap based on a dream she had after taking Ambien. The turnover rate was staggering. In my first 4 months, we lost 30% of our staff, including some key engineers. Each time, Vivian would announce their departure with a chilling smile and some variation of, they couldn't handle the pace of innovation. Translation, they valued their mental health over stock options in what was increasingly looking like the Titanic of startups. The breaking point came during what we called the Thursday Massacre. Our monthly all-hands meeting started normally enough. Vivian stood at the front of our gathering space. She refused to call it a room, it was always a space or zone or collaborative thought arena. I've been reviewing everyone's output, she began, pacing like a general addressing troops before a suicide mission. And I've identified our weak links. What followed was a public execution. One by one, she called out 7 employees by name, listing their failures and shortcomings in excruciating detail before telling them to clean out their desks. Devon, a UX designer, was berated for uninspired wireframes that lack vision. Zoe from marketing was dismissed for posting tweets that only got 23 retweets when our goal was 50. Raj nearly got fired for prioritizing unnecessary security features over user experience, his unnecessary security feature being two-factor authentication. The room was silent except for Vivian's voice and the occasional stifled sob. No one dared make eye contact with the condemned, fearing they might be next. I sat frozen, clutching my laptop so hard my knuckles turned white, a single thought looping through my brain, this is insane. This is actually insane. After the massacre, we survivors huddled in the kitchen, speaking in whispers despite Vivian having left for the day. She's getting worse, said Alexis from the data team, nervously glancing toward the door. Last month it was just 3 people. I heard the board is putting pressure on her about the burn rate, Lucas from finance murmured. We're hemorrhaging money and the Series C funding round isn't going well. I'm updating my LinkedIn tonight, said Taylor, another data scientist. This place is a psychological horror movie. There's got to be a pattern to her meltdowns, I said, more thinking aloud than actually addressing the group. If we could predict when she's going to go nuclear. Alexis gave me a look. What are you thinking, Morgan? That's when I had the idea that would eventually bring down NeuraTech. Nothing, I said quickly. Just a random thought. But it wasn't random at all. Here's the thing about data scientists, we can't help ourselves. Show us a pattern, or even the suggestion of a pattern, and we're like bloodhounds catching a scent. It's practically pathological. That night, I started a spreadsheet. I documented every Vivian outburst I could remember, with dates, times, severity, on a scale of 1 to 10, triggers, and outcomes. Then I messaged a few trusted colleagues and asked for their recollections. The data came flooding in. Everyone, it seemed, had been keeping mental, and sometimes actual, notes of Hurricane Vivian's destructive path. Within 48 hours, I'd compiled 3 years of tyrannical behavior, mapped across multiple variables. Time of day, morning outbursts were typically worse. Day of week, Monday and Thursday spikes. Proximity to investor meetings. Market fluctuations. App Store rating changes. Even the correlation with Mercury retrograde, surprisingly significant. I called it Project Cassandra, after the Greek prophetess doomed to predict disasters that no one would believe. Its purpose was simple: to create an algorithm that could predict Vivian's meltdowns so we could protect ourselves, take remote days, schedule dentist appointments, or simply be mentally prepared. For 3 weeks, I worked on the algorithm in secret, staying late after Vivian left and coming in early before she arrived. I built a machine learning model that ingested all our data points and started making predictions. And here's the crazy part: it worked. The first prediction gave us a 92% chance of a level 8+ outburst on a Tuesday afternoon, triggered by our monthly active user report. Sure enough, at 3:47 p.m. that day, Vivian stormed through the office and berated our growth team for a solid 20 minutes because user retention had dropped 1.7%. Word spread quickly among the survivors. Soon, I was running a covert early warning system for Vivian's reign of terror. I'd send out coded messages through our encrypted group chat. Weather forecast: severe thunderstorms expected after lunch. Seek shelter. Volcano activity at 85%. Eruption likely during the 2 p.m. demo. We developed survival techniques. Critical meetings were scheduled during her predictably calmer periods. Important decisions were slipped in for approval when the algorithm predicted clearer skies. Team members with deadline flexibility would work from home on high-risk days. For the first time since I'd joined NeuraTech, I felt a sense of control and, weirdly, purpose. I wasn't just surviving a toxic workplace, I was helping others survive too. But then came the complication I never saw coming. His name was Jason Kim, and he joined NeuraTech as our new Director of Business Development 6 weeks after Project Cassandra began. Jason was everything Silicon Valley pretends to worship but secretly resents: genuinely brilliant, emotionally intelligent, ethical, and completely unimpressed by startup theater. He'd built and sold 2 successful companies before turning 30, then spent 2 years teaching entrepreneurship to high school students in underserved communities. And somehow, inexplicably, he'd been hired by Vivian. "I don't get it," I whispered to Alexis during Jason's first day introduction. "He seems normal. Why would he work here?" "Money," she whispered back. The rumor is she offered him some insane compensation package to impress investors. Triple the market rate plus equity. "He'll quit within a month," I predicted. But Jason didn't quit. Instead, he did something even more surprising: he stood up to Vivian. The first time it happened was during a product roadmap meeting. Vivian wanted to implement a feature that would record users without explicitly asking for permission, a blatant privacy violation. "We can't do that," Jason said calmly. The room went silent. Nobody contradicted Vivian. Ever. "Excuse me?" Vivian's voice had that dangerous edge we'd all learned to fear. "It's not just ethically questionable, it's illegal in several states," Jason continued, as relaxed as if discussing lunch options. "We'd be opening ourselves up to massive liability." We all braced for the explosion that never came. Instead, Vivian paused, then said through gritted teeth, "Fine. Explore alternatives." The office buzzed with disbelief for days. Someone had challenged the Queen and survived. Over the next few weeks, Jason continued his death-defying act of treating Vivian like a rational human being. He didn't cower, didn't flatter, and most shockingly, didn't get fired. When she started to spiral, he would somehow talk her down from the ledge with a mix of respect and unshakable boundaries. It was like watching a lion tamer at work. Even more incredible, the algorithm started showing fewer red alert days. Vivian's outbursts, while still frequent, decreased in both intensity and collateral damage. "Your model must need recalibration," Alexis suggested. "The variables have changed." But I knew what the variable was: Jason Kim. And that's when my conscience started nagging me. If Vivian could be managed, if she could actually learn to behave more humanely, maybe Project Cassandra was unnecessary? Maybe we should be focusing on reform rather than prediction? These moral quandaries kept me up at night, that, and the increasingly uncomfortable awareness that I was developing a massive crush on Jason Kim, NeuraTech's Dragon Whisperer. The crush situation got complicated fast. 2 months after Jason joined, I was working late, running a new data set through my algorithm. I thought I was alone in the office until I heard a voice behind me. "That's an interesting model you're building." I nearly jumped out of my skin, slapping my laptop shut with the guilty reflex of someone caught watching porn. "Jason." "Hi. Just working on, user sentiment analysis." He leaned against the desk next to mine, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised in what I would later learn was his "I know you're lying but I'm too polite to say it directly" expression. User sentiment with variables labeled Monday rage factor and investor meeting proximity trigger? My face went hot. "You saw that?" "I did." He didn't seem angry, just curious. "Morgan, are you developing an algorithm to predict Vivian's behavior?" There was no point denying it. "Yes." I expected shock, disapproval, perhaps a lecture on privacy and professional ethics. Instead, Jason nodded thoughtfully. "Show me." For the next hour, I walked him through Project Cassandra, the data collection, the variables, the predictive modeling, and the warning system we'd established. Rather than being appalled, he asked insightful questions about my methodology and even suggested additional variables to consider. "This is brilliant work," he said finally. "Disturbing as hell that it's necessary, but brilliant." "You're not going to tell Vivian?" "God, no." He looked genuinely surprised at the suggestion. "Morgan, I took this job because NeuraTech's core technology has enormous potential. The emotion recognition AI could revolutionize mental health support, education, help people with autism navigate social cues, applications that actually help people." He sighed. "But Vivian's only interested in how to monetize it by helping corporations manipulate consumers." "Why stay, then?" I asked. "Because I'm trying to steer the ship toward better waters." He paused, then added, "And because someone needs to run interference between Vivian and all of you." The revelation that Jason was essentially serving as a human shield for the team made my crush level up from problematic to potentially catastrophic. Not only was he brilliant and kind, but he was also secretly heroic. It was too much. "Your algorithm could help me," he continued, oblivious to my internal meltdown. "If I know when she's likely to be most volatile, I can better manage those situations." And just like that, Jason became the only executive member of Project Cassandra. Over the next few weeks, we met regularly to refine the model, always under the guise of strategic planning sessions. The algorithm got smarter, Vivian got slightly less terrible, and my crush got increasingly hopeless. Until the day Jason suggested we grab dinner after work to discuss a new approach to the predictive model. "Like, at a restaurant?" I asked stupidly. "As opposed to eating in the server room?" "Yes, a restaurant." His smile made my stomach do that annoying flippy thing. "That would be." "I mean, yes. That works. For the project." "Dinner." "Yes. Smooth, Morgan. Real smooth." The dinner was definitely not about the algorithm. We spent 5 minutes discussing Project Cassandra and 3 hours talking about everything else: our backgrounds, career paths, favorite books, worst dates, and shared hatred of people who don't return shopping carts to the corral. "I still can't believe you left Google to work at NeuraTech," I said as we split a dessert. "That's like leaving a luxury cruise ship to board the Titanic. Post-iceberg." Jason laughed. "I left Google because it was too big to make a real impact. I thought a smaller company meant more influence over the direction." He shook his head. "I didn't do enough due diligence on the captain." "No one knows the real Vivian until they're trapped in her orbit," I agreed. "She's like a black hole with great PR." "The board is getting concerned," Jason said, his voice dropping. "The company's burning cash, and the toxic culture is becoming an open secret in the valley. Good engineers won't touch us, and several investors pulled out of the Series C round last week. Is NeuraTech in trouble? I asked, suddenly worried about my job security and student loans. Let's just say I'm keeping my LinkedIn profile updated. He met my eyes. You should too. On the walk to the train station, our hands brushed accidentally, then intentionally, then interlaced. By the time we reached the platform, all pretense of a professional relationship had evaporated. This is probably a terrible idea, I said as we stood waiting for our separate trains. Dating someone from work? Generally, yes, he agreed. But considering the average tenure at NeuraTech is approximately that of a fruit fly's lifespan, I think we can risk it. Then he kissed me, and I temporarily forgot about Vivian, NeuraTech, and the slowly derailing train that was our workplace. My train came first. As the doors closed between us, Jason called out, "Check your algorithm tomorrow morning. Board meeting at 9 a.m. I spent the entire ride home fluctuating between giddy replays of the kiss and anxiety about what tomorrow's board meeting might bring. The algorithm predicted a Category 5 Vivian Chen for the next day, with a 97% probability, the highest rating I'd ever seen. I sent out the emergency alert to our survivor group before going to bed. Extreme weather warning, take cover, work remotely if possible, delay all non-essential communications. This is not a drill. I didn't take my own advice, though. With Jason presenting at the board meeting, I wanted to be on site for moral support. Plus, I'll admit it, I was curious. What could trigger such an extreme reading on the rage meter? The answer waited in my inbox the next morning, a company-wide email from our HR director, our third one that year, with the subject line Mandatory Culture Survey Confidential. The survey had been commissioned by the board to assess employee satisfaction and company culture. It promised complete anonymity and asked brutally specific questions. Rate your agreement with the following statements on a scale of 1 to 5. I feel psychologically safe expressing concerns at work. My contributions are respected and valued. Leadership communicates clear and consistent expectations. I would recommend NeuraTech as a great place to work. It was a corporate colonoscopy, and everyone knew what it would reveal. The office was eerily quiet that morning. Most people had heeded my warning and worked remotely. Those who couldn't were tiptoeing around as if the floor might collapse beneath them. Vivian arrived at 8:30, storming past without acknowledging anyone. She barricaded herself in her office until the board meeting began at 9. Through the glass walls, I could see Jason and other executives gathering in the conference room. The CFO looked like he was marching to his own execution. I tried to focus on my work, but it was impossible. The glass walls of NeuraTech, meant to symbolize transparency, were about to provide us all with a front-row seat to whatever corporate disaster was unfolding. At 9:46 a.m., it happened. Vivian's voice exploded through the office like a sonic boom. This is sabotage. She was standing now, pointing accusingly at someone across the table I couldn't see. The board members' faces ranged from uncomfortable to alarmed. These survey results are lies. Someone has poisoned my company against me. Jason said something I couldn't hear, his posture calm but firm. How dare you? Vivian shrieked, and then picked up her hydro flask and hurled it against the wall, where it left a dent before clattering to the floor. The remaining employees in the office were now openly staring. Someone was filming with their phone. I wanted to look away but couldn't. Vivian was in full meltdown now, pacing and gesticulating wildly. Through the glass, her tirade was muffled but still partially audible. Ungrateful employees, impossible standards. My company, without me, nothing. Then abruptly, she stopped, turned to the room at large, and announced clearly enough for everyone to hear, "If you think you can do better than me, good luck." She grabbed her purse, stormed out of the conference room, and marched through the main office toward the exit. As she passed my desk, our eyes met briefly. The raw fury in her gaze made me physically recoil. The elevator doors closed behind her, and silence descended on NeuraTech. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. emergency all hands in 30 minutes. She's been suspended pending board review. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Vivian Chen, suspended from her own company? It seemed impossible. But the algorithm had been right. A Category 5 event had indeed occurred, we just hadn't anticipated that Vivian herself would be the primary casualty. The next 2 weeks were corporate chaos theory in action. The board appointed Jason as interim CEO while they conducted an investigation into what they diplomatically called leadership concerns. Vivian was officially on a leave of absence, though everyone knew she'd been forced out after the survey results revealed an employee satisfaction rate of 12%, apparently the lowest the consulting firm had ever measured without involving actual human rights violations. But Vivian wasn't going quietly. She still owned a significant portion of the company and had allies on the board. The power struggle played out through leaked emails, emergency meetings, and increasingly desperate company-wide communications assuring us that everything was business as usual. On a personal level, Jason and I agreed to put our budding relationship on temporary hold given his new position. The last thing this situation needs is a conflict of interest scandal, he said, and I reluctantly agreed. Professional integrity was sexy, but also incredibly inconvenient. Project Cassandra was officially discontinued. Without Vivian actively terrorizing the office, the algorithm had no purpose. I archived the code and data, feeling a strange mix of relief and loss. It had been problematic but also my weird, secret contribution to workplace survival. Then came the fateful Wednesday when everything imploded. It started with a Bloomberg article, Trouble in Paradise, NeuraTech faces leadership crisis amid culture complaints. Someone had leaked details of Vivian's suspension and the damning survey results to the press. The article quoted anonymous employees describing a culture of fear and psychologically abusive leadership. 3 hours later, Vivian stormed back into the office, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. "Where is Jason Kim?" she demanded. Jason emerged from his office, formerly her office. "Vivian, you're not supposed to be here. If you need to discuss anything, your lawyer can contact the board's legal counsel." "I don't need to contact anyone," she spat. "I'm taking back my company. These are my lawyers, and they'll explain how your little coup has failed." One of the suit-wearing men stepped forward with the smug confidence of someone charging $800 an hour. "Ms. Chen has submitted evidence to the board showing that this entire situation was orchestrated by Mr. Kim, who conspired to undermine her leadership." My blood ran cold. "What evidence?" The lawyer continued, "Furthermore, we have proof that company resources were misappropriated to develop surveillance technologies targeting Ms. Chen, violating numerous privacy laws and corporate policies." Every eye in the office slowly turned toward me. I felt my face burning as I realized what had happened. Vivian had somehow discovered Project Cassandra. Jason maintained his composure. "These are serious allegations that should be addressed through proper channels, not by disrupting the workplace." "My workplace," Vivian corrected with a venomous smile. "And I'll do whatever I want in it." She turned to address the entire office. "Anyone who has a problem with my leadership style is welcome to leave immediately." As if on cue, her lawyer produced a stack of documents. "We've prepared separation agreements for certain employees identified as participating in this targeted harassment campaign." He began reading names from a list. Morgan Park. My name. First on the list. Of course. Alexis Williams. Raj Patel. Taylor Nguyen. Project Cassandra's core users. We were being purged. Jason stepped between the lawyer and us. "Stop. This is not how we handle personnel matters at NeuraTech." "It's exactly how I handle them," Vivian snapped. "And the board has reinstated me as CEO, effective immediately." A collective gasp rippled through the office. "That's not possible," Jason said. "The board meeting to decide on permanent leadership isn't until Friday." "Emergency session," Vivian replied with a smirk. I still have friends, Jason. Unlike you, I didn't waste my time playing nice. I felt sick. Not just because my career was imploding in real time, but because I'd inadvertently dragged my colleagues down with me. Project Cassandra, meant to protect us, had become the weapon used against us. Jason and Vivian continued their confrontation, but I was barely listening. My mind was racing, trying to understand how she'd discovered the algorithm. I'd been so careful. Then it hit me. The week before, IT had performed a routine system backup of all employee laptops. Vivian must have had someone search through the data. But even if she found the code, how could she prove what it was for? The variable names were coded, the documentation minimal. Unless. A new, horrible thought occurred to me. What if someone had told her? What if one of our trusted group had betrayed Project Cassandra? I scanned the faces of my colleagues, wondering who might have sold us out. But all I saw was the same shock and fear I was feeling. Amid the chaos, my phone buzzed with a notification. A calendar invite from Jason for strategic response discussion in conference room B. Now. While Vivian continued berating the stunned employees, I slipped away toward the small conference room on the other side of the floor. Jason was already there, along with Alexis, Raj, and Taylor, the core Project Cassandra team. He closed the door behind us. We have about 5 minutes before she notices we're gone, he said. So I'll be brief. Vivian didn't just find the algorithm, she accessed all the data you collected. My stomach dropped. How? It was password protected. Morgan, you used your employee ID as the password, Alexis said gently. Not exactly Fort Knox. I winced. Security had never been my strong suit. The point is, Jason continued, she has everything, the documentation of her outbursts, the predictive model, and worst of all from her perspective, proof that her behavior was so consistent in its toxicity that it could be algorithmically predicted. We're so fired, Taylor moaned. Probably, Jason agreed. But there's something else you should know. When I became interim CEO, I gained access to some concerning information. He lowered his voice. NeuraTech's core technology doesn't work nearly as well as Vivian has been claiming to investors. What do you mean, doesn't work? I asked. I mean the accuracy rates she's been presenting in pitch decks are fabricated. The emotion recognition algorithm is barely better than random chance for certain key emotions. She's been selling vaporware. Raj let out a low whistle. That's securities fraud. Exactly. And the board doesn't know yet. I was planning to present my findings on Friday, but now. He checked his watch. We're out of time. Here's what you need to know, whatever happens out there, whatever Vivian says, do not sign anything. Don't quit, don't accept any separation agreement, and don't admit to any wrongdoing. What are you going to do? I asked. The look Jason gave me was complicated, regretful, determined, with just a hint of that rebel spirit that had made me fall for him in the first place. Something either very brave or very stupid, he replied. Probably both. Then he walked out, back into the battlefield of the main office where Vivian was still holding court. We followed, keeping a cautious distance. Jason approached Vivian directly, positioning himself so his back was to the glass wall, and the stunned employees watching from outside. Vivian, can we speak privately? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of everyone, she replied coldly. All right. He took a deep breath. I know about the falsified investor decks. I know the technology's actual accuracy rates are nowhere near what you've been claiming. I know you've been committing fraud. The color drained from Vivian's face. How dare you? I've already sent the evidence to 3 board members, Jason continued. You can try to fire me and everyone else who knows the truth, but this isn't going away. Vivian's composure cracked. You're bluffing. Test me, Jason challenged. See what happens when you push people too far. When you create a culture so toxic that your employees have to create an algorithm just to predict your next abusive episode. A terrible silence fell over the office. Then Vivian did something none of us expected. She laughed. Not a normal laugh, a high, brittle sound that sent chills down my spine. You really think the board will side with you, she said. Over me? I built this company. And now you're destroying it, Jason replied quietly. The talent is leaving. The culture is poisonous. And the product doesn't work. Get out, Vivian hissed. All of you conspiracy plotters, get out of my company before I call security. You can't fire us for documenting workplace harassment, I found myself saying, stepping forward to stand beside Jason. That's retaliation, and it's illegal. Watch me, Vivian snarled. What happened next occurred with such Hollywood perfect timing that if this were a movie script, you'd call it too convenient. The elevator doors opened, and in walked 3 people in expensive suits, different from Vivian's lawyers. A woman in front, flanked by 2 men. They looked like the kind of people who golfed with senators and had buildings named after them. Miss Chen, the woman said crisply. The board sent us to escort you from the premises. Elizabeth, Vivian faltered, recognizing the board chairwoman. There's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Elizabeth cut her off. We've called an emergency board meeting based on serious allegations of securities fraud. While that's being investigated, you are suspended, actually suspended, not the voluntary leave we previously discussed. She nodded to the men with her. These gentlemen from corporate security will help you gather your personal items. Vivian looked as if she'd been slapped. You can't do this. This is my company. It's a publicly traded company with a fiduciary duty to its shareholders, Elizabeth corrected. And right now, you represent an unacceptable risk. Her gaze swept over the silent office, taking in the scene. Mr. Kim, I assume you have those documents we discussed? Jason nodded. In my office. And it's all backed up off-site. Good. Elizabeth turned back to Vivian. We'll continue this conversation with our respective legal teams present. For now, please collect your things and leave without further disruption. I'd seen Vivian angry many times. I'd seen her cruel, petty, and vindictive. But I'd never seen her defeated until that moment. As the security team escorted her toward her office to collect her belongings, she passed by me. For a split second, our eyes met. You, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. You did this with your stupid algorithm. Then she was gone, marched away to pack up her ergonomic chair and motivational wall quotes. The office remained frozen in shock until Elizabeth, the board chairwoman, cleared her throat. NeuraTech employees, I apologize for this dramatic scene. Please return to your work. Mr. Kim will continue as interim CEO while we sort through these issues. Rest assured, the board takes corporate culture very seriously, and we're committed to making NeuraTech a positive workplace for all. With that corporate speak band-aid applied to our gaping emotional wounds, she and her entourage followed after Vivian. For a full minute, no one moved or spoke. Then, like a spell breaking, everyone started talking at once. Groups formed, theories were exchanged, and the tension that had been suffocating the office for months began to dissipate like fog in sunlight. Jason caught my eye across the room and gave me a small nod, part acknowledgement, part promise that we'd talk later. Alexis appeared at my side. Did you know he was going to do that? She whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. I shook my head. I had no idea. I was still processing what had just happened, how my little survival algorithm had somehow become the catalyst for a corporate coup. For the rest of the day, NeuraTech existed in a strange limbo. Work nominally continued, but most people were too busy dissecting the morning's drama in hushed conversations around coffee machines and in Slack DMs. The company-wide Slack channel remained eerily silent, no one quite brave enough to acknowledge what had happened in a permanent, written record. Around 5 p.m., Jason called an impromptu all-hands meeting. First, thank you all for your professionalism during what has been an unprecedented day, he began, standing at the front of our gathering space, which I immediately decided to start calling a room like a normal person. I want to be transparent about what happens next. The office was packed. Even the remote workers had dialed in, unwilling to miss this particular meeting. The board is launching a formal investigation into both the technology accuracy claims and the workplace culture issues. During this time, I'll continue as interim CEO. He paused, looking around the room. I won't pretend this isn't serious. NeuraTech is in crisis. But crises can be opportunities for transformation. He outlined immediate changes: no more weekend work expectations, mandatory response times for emails were abolished, and most surprisingly, a review of our core product's ethical implications. Our technology has potential beyond marketing manipulation, he said. We're going to explore applications in education, healthcare, and accessibility. That's the company I want to build, one that actually helps people. A tentative hope began to spread throughout the room, foreign territory for most NeuraTech employees who had been operating in survival mode for so long. As people filed out after the meeting, Jason caught my arm. We need to talk, he said quietly. Meet me at Willow's Cafe at 7? Willow's was a small coffee shop 2 blocks from the office, far enough to ensure privacy from any lingering NeuraTech employees. When I arrived, Jason was already there, 2 cups of tea waiting on the table. How many NDAs do you think I'm violating right now? He asked with a tired smile as I sat down. Probably all of them, I replied, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. For a moment, we sat in comfortable silence, processing the day's events. Did you plan this? I finally asked. Was this some kind of elaborate corporate chess game I didn't know I was part of? Jason shook his head. No. When I joined NeuraTech, I genuinely wanted to help build something worthwhile. I knew Vivian had issues, but I didn't realize how deep they went until I started working there. He sipped his tea. Finding out about Project Cassandra was a surprise. Discovering the fraudulent investor data was an even bigger one. How did you find that? When I became interim CEO, I started reviewing our technical documentation to understand where we really stood. The discrepancies were obvious once I had access to the raw data. He leaned forward. But what's important is what happens next. Which is? The board wants me to stay on, he said. Permanently. My heart did a small flip. That's amazing. Congratulations. I haven't accepted yet. I frowned. Why not? It's the perfect opportunity to rebuild NeuraTech the right way. It is. But there's a complication. He reached across the table and took my hand. You. Me? The company just went through a scandal partly involving an algorithm you created. If I stay as CEO and we continue seeing each other, it looks problematic. I pulled my hand back, suddenly understanding. So you're breaking up with me? Before we've even really started? No, Jason said firmly. I'm asking what you want. Because I see 3 options. He counted them off on his fingers. 1. I decline the CEO role, and we can date without any ethical concerns. But someone else takes over, and we lose the chance to rebuild NeuraTech properly. 2. I take the job, and we put our relationship on hold for as long as we're both at NeuraTech. Or 3. He hesitated. One of us leaves the company. I stared at him. Are you asking me to quit my job for a relationship that's barely started? No, he said quickly. I'm laying out the options. Honestly. I would never ask that of you. I sat back, mind racing. What would you do if the choice was entirely yours? Jason considered this carefully. I'd take the CEO role. Not for the title or the money, but because I truly believe NeuraTech's technology could do good in the world with the right leadership. His eyes met mine. But not at the expense of this. Whatever this is between us. I thought about my own options. NeuraTech had been a nightmare under Vivian, but with Jason at the helm, it could be different. It could be what I'd hoped for when I first joined. On the other hand, the company would forever be associated with Project Cassandra in my mind, my own private Silicon Valley trauma. I need time to think, I said finally. Jason nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. 3 days later, the tech news site The Information broke the full story. NeuraTech CEO ousted after employee creates algorithm to predict her toxic behavior. The article detailed everything: Project Cassandra, the fraudulent investor claims, the culture of fear at NeuraTech. They even had screenshots of my algorithm, which I'm still trying to figure out how they obtained. By afternoon, the story had been picked up by TechCrunch, Business Insider, and even mainstream outlets like CNN. My LinkedIn inbox exploded with messages from journalists seeking comments. 3 venture capital firms reached out to see if I might be interested in building predictive people analytics for their portfolio companies. Hard pass. I had become a minor Silicon Valley legend, the data scientist who algorithmically toppled a toxic CEO. To NeuraTech's credit, they handled the PR surprisingly well. Rather than denying or minimizing the issues, they leaned into the narrative of transformation and renewal. Jason gave a candid interview acknowledging the company's past failings and outlining a path forward centered on ethical AI applications. The board officially offered him the permanent CEO position, which he accepted a week after our cafe conversation. And me? I made my decision the day the story broke. I walked into Jason's office, still felt weird to see him behind that desk, and closed the door. I'm resigning, I said without preamble. Jason's face fell, but he nodded slowly. I understand. Not for the reasons you think, I clarified. I got an offer. From one of our competitors? From MIT Media Lab. They want me to head up a research project on ethical AI and workplace dynamics. I couldn't keep the excitement from my voice. It's perfect. I can study algorithmic approaches to organizational health while helping establish best practices for AI in workplace settings. Jason's expression transformed from disappointment to genuine happiness. Morgan, that's incredible. They'd be lucky to have you. There's more, I continued. It's in Cambridge. 3,000 miles away from here. Ah. The implications hung in the air between us. 3,000 miles, I repeated. A 5.5-hour flight. Or a 3-hour video call, accounting for the time difference. He raised an eyebrow. Is that your subtle way of suggesting long distance might work? I'm a data scientist. We don't do subtle. I'm explicitly stating that geographic separation doesn't necessarily preclude romantic involvement in the digital age. Jason fought a smile. That's the nerdiest way anyone has ever asked me to try long distance. Is that a yes? It's a let's figure it out, he said, standing up and coming around the desk. MIT would be crazy not to snap you up. And NeuraTech would be morally obligated to work with any ethical AI initiative you lead. Convenient excuse for business trips, I noted. Extremely. He took both my hands in his. I'm going to miss working with you. I'll miss seeing you terrorize executives with your radical ideas like treat employees with basic human dignity and don't commit securities fraud. 6 weeks later, I packed up my San Francisco apartment and headed east. The MIT position was everything I'd hoped for: challenging, meaningful, with colleagues who saw algorithmic ethics as more than just a PR buzzword. NeuraTech underwent its own transformation. With Jason at the helm, the company pivoted toward applications in educational technology and mental health support. They scrapped the creepy consumer manipulation features and rebuilt the core technology to be more accurate, transparent, and consent-based. The company also became something of a case study in cultural turnaround. Jason implemented all the changes he'd promised and more, earning NeuraTech spots on best places to work lists just 18 months after the scandal. As for us, we made it work. Weekend visits, video dates, and yes, convenient business collaborations between MIT Media Lab and NeuraTech's new ethics board. 2 years after my dramatic exit from Silicon Valley, Jason proposed during a sunrise hike in the White Mountains. A year after that, he relocated to Cambridge to launch NeuraTech's East Coast office. Project Cassandra lives on, though not in its original form. The research team at MIT adapted the core concept into a broader framework for detecting early warning signs of toxic workplace cultures, minus the invasive surveillance aspects. We called it the Organizational Health Monitor, and it's being piloted at several forward-thinking companies. Sometimes I look back at that terrifying Thursday when everything fell apart and came together simultaneously. What started as a desperate attempt to survive a toxic boss became the catalyst for transforming an entire company, launching my research career, and ultimately finding my partner. I've learned that data can tell powerful stories if you know how to listen. And sometimes, those stories can change everything. My name is Morgan Park, and this is how I accidentally took down Silicon Valley's worst boss using nothing but data science, an accidental whistleblower, and an algorithm designed for revenge that ended up creating something much better, a chance for redemption. The end.